How to source consistent cacao supply without risking your production. Most businesses don't actually struggle with cacao. They struggle with inconsistent supply. One shipment performs well, the next one doesn't. The flavour changes, the colour changes, the processing changes, and suddenly production becomes unpredictable. A lot of buyers think this is normal in cacao industry, but in reality, inconsistency usually comes from weak sourcing and weak systems, not the cacao itself. And today I want to break down why cacao supply becomes inconsistent, what reliable sourcing looks like, why smart businesses evaluate systems, not just product, and how structured sourcing reduces long-term production risks. One of the biggest misconceptions in the industry is that origin alone determines quality, but that's only a part of the picture, because two suppliers from the exact same origin can deliver completely different results. Why? Because consistency is created through systems, not geographical. The reality is most procurement issues begin long before cacao reaches the buyer. They begin during fermentation, drying, processing, storage and supplying, and handling. See documentation control, and when these systems are inconsistent, the cacao becomes inconsistent too. That's why professional sourcing isn't simple. Who has cacao available? It's who can deliver repeatable performance and consistently over a period of time. Most businesses only realize there's a sourcing problem after production issues begin appearing. That might look like flavour instability, colour variation, poor solubility, inconsistent aroma, reformulation problems, processing inefficiencies, and many buyer initial blames. They blame the weather, they blame the system, they blame the season, origin variability, but often the real issue is supply inconsistency. For example, some suppliers use controlled fermentation systems, others use highly inconsistent fermentation methods with very little standardization. Some monitor temperature, turning cycles, fermentation duration, drying stages. Others don't, and that directly impacts the final powder quality. The same thing applies to moisture handling, contamination, prevention, storage conditions, processing consistency without structure. Variations becomes a part of the supply chain, and once inconsistency enters the system, it affects everything downstream. A lot of people misunderstand consistency. See, consistency does not mean every batch is magically identical. What it really means is controlled variations within professional standards. Reliable cacao supply usually includes repeatable fermentation outcomes, stable flavour profiles, moisture consistency, processing standardization, documentation systems, quality control procedures, long-term supply coordination. Professional buyers understand something very important. The goal is not perfection, the goal is predictability, because predictability reduces operational risk, production instabilities, customer inconsistency, manufacturing, waste, and that's why structured procurement matters so much in commercial food production. This is where many businesses separate themselves. Some companies simply buy cacao, others build sourcing systems. Buying is transactional, sourcing is strategic. Transactional buying usually focuses on price, availability, short-term supply, but strategic sourcing focuses on reliable, repeatable supplier structure, long-term consistency, documentation, and quality systems. That's a completely different approach, because smart businesses understand cheap inconsistency often becomes expensive later, especially when production batches fail, flavour changes, customers notice inconsistency, reformulation becomes necessary. Manufacturing efficiency drops. That's why procurement teams increasingly evaluate the supply system itself, not just the production. Fermentation is one of the most important stages in cacao quality development, and yet it also is one of the most inconsistent parts of the global supply chain in premium cacao powder. Controlled fermentation helps create flavour stability, balanced acidity, aroma development, repeatable processing performance, but uncontrolled fermentation creates variabilities, and variability creates risk. For example, if fermentation timing changes, the final cacao profile changes too. If drying isn't managed correctly, moisture problems appear. If handling standards vary, quality becomes unstable. That's why professional sourcing systems evaluate fermentation methods, processing controls, drying consistency, supplier procedures also become reliable, because cacao supply starts before export. It starts inside the production system itself. Professional buyers usually evaluate far more than do you have a cacao available. They assess sourcing structure, traceability, supplier consistency, communication standards, documentation, scalability, quality control systems, and so much more, because long-term supply reliability matters more than short-term availability. A supplier may provide one good shipment, but can they deliver and provide repeatable quality, stable processing, scalable consistency, and reliability, especially with communication? See, long-term procurement, confidence is required. That's the real question. And this is why supply systems matter so much, because consistency is not created through marketing, it's created through operational structure. The global cacao industry is slowly shifting. Buyers are becoming more focused on traceability, consistency, documentation, processing, standards, and procurement reliability, especially in premium food manufacturing, because businesses increasingly understand supply chain instabilities creates commercial instability. And that's why structured sourcing is becoming more important. Structured sourcing helps reduce procurement, uncertainty, inconsistent batches, See quality, fluctuation, long-term supply risks. It creates a more controlled supply environment, and over time that becomes a major competitive advantage. At the end of the day, consistent cacao doesn't happen by accident. It comes from structured fermentation, controlled processing, reliable supplier systems, long-term sourcing, relationships. The businesses at scale successfully usually aren't buying differently. They're sourcing differently. And the companies that understand that early usually reduce far more risk over time. If you want to learn more about structured cacao sourcing, traceability supply systems, reliable bulk cacao procurement, and long-term supply consistency, you can explore more at www.globalcacao.store or Global Cacao Traders online. Simply visit the sourcing and bulk supply pages. The links are below in the description. Because in professional cacao sourcing, consistency is not luck, it's structure. Only here at Global Cacao Traders Online, your sourcing and distributions platform for premium cacao powder globally. Feel free to subscribe, like and share this channel with fellow friends and family.